Hello and welcome to my channel. I am the Psych Autoscorer, and today we will be talking about scoring the WAIS-IV using one of my auto-scoring templates. See the description below for a link to the template. The WAIS-IV, also known as the Weschler Adult Intelligence Scale 4th edition, is a comprehensive test used to measure cognitive functioning in adults with 10 core subtests and 5 supplemental tests. The WAIS-IV assesses a wide range of cognitive abilities, including verbal comprehension, perceptual reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. Hopefully with this template, you won't have to score the WAIS-IV by hand ever again. So, I, like many of you, have had to score the WAIS-IV by hand, and I really didn't want to pay for a, one of those really expensive online programs that works with the company in order to score it, and you have to make payments every time you score it. So I created this template just as a way to quickly score it by hand without having to pay way too much. So in order to use this template, what you're going to have to do is just fill in the information in these yellow boxes, and that is it. That is all you're going to have to do after you've acquired these raw scores and have the test date and date of birth. So I'm just going to show you how it works real quick. First we'll enter in our test date. That test date is November 13th, 2013. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a lag right there. That's just because there's some formulas running in the background. The next part is to enter in the patient's date of birth. This patient's date of birth will be August 24th, 1962. And you can see once we enter in that date, we'll get the age of the patient and the months and days. So this patient's 51 years. So on November 13th, 2013, this patient was 51 years old in 2 months and 20 days, which puts them in the age group of 45 to 54. So once you've done that, and you know the age of the patient, you'll just enter in the first 10 of the core subtests. So we'll start. I have some sample data here, and this is exactly how it will look when you enter it using the template. So you can see there's a little bit of a lag, just as the formulas are calculating as you enter it. There's some complex formulas happening in the background, so don't worry if you have that lag. So you only do the first 10 core subtests, and if for some reason a patient can't do one, like let's say they didn't do arithmetic just because of some reason they couldn't do it, then you would take out that one, or you wouldn't include it, and you would include one from the working memory group, because arithmetic and digit span are the two used to calculate working memory. And so since arithmetic's not working, you take one of these supplemental tests that does working memory, which would be letter number sequencing, I believe. Let me just check that. And yes, letter number sequencing. So you would just put a score there. So let's just say 15. And it would again calculate these scaled scores. But we're going to go ahead and pretend that this patient was able to do the arithmetic, even though they scored quite a low score. So once you enter in this information, you've already finished scoring the WAIS-IV. The next part is just interpretation. So if you just want to know how to use a template, you did it. Good job. If you'd like to know more about the interpretation, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about that. I don't often do assessments, so take it with a grain of salt. But basically, these scaled scores are just taking the average for that age group, and then the reference group right here is for 20 to 34-year-olds, and what their what their average would have looked like had they gotten this raw score here. So after that, it'll sum up all of these, all of the scaled scores into the specific cognitive abilities. So we have verbal comprehension here, we have the perceptual reasoning index, working memory index, processing speed index, and the full scale intelligence quotient there, or full scale IQ. Once you have those, you can make the calculation to create the composite score. The composite score is going to have the average at 100, and anything above that would show a patient that has an above average cognitive ability in that domain. and a score below 100 would show a above average score for that. So we can see for this person's verbal comprehension index, they had a composite score of 102, which would put them in the 55th percentile rank, meaning that they scored above 55% of their peers of the same age. But then you can see in perceptual reasoning that they had a composite score of 84, which, not a great score. You want that to get closer to 100 being the average. So we can see that they're in the 14th percentile rank, which might indicate some impairment or just being below average in that domain. And then we also have the confidence intervals here, a 90% confidence interval and a 95% confidence interval. Basically, that's just saying, trying to give you some wiggle room on the accuracy because, everyone's life experience is different. And if we're just going off of the math portion, maybe at the school they learned a different kind of math, or they just weren't familiar with those questions presented to them. So this kind of gives them some wiggle room to test the accuracy of that and make compensation for what's going on behind the scenes there. Now, once you have the composite scores, you just can kind of compare them against each other. We're using the overall mean for the discrepancy comparison. So we're just taking things like the verbal comprehension and subtracting it by the perceptual reasoning index, and just trying to see, is this person on average impaired in these areas, or are certain things specifically impaired or specifically superior than other domains in their thinking processes. So we can see that with verbal comprehension and perceptual reasoning, that there's a difference of 18 in the composite scores, and that gives you the critical values at 0.15 and 0.05, and it'll let you know if those are significant differences, which they are, and it'll give you the base rates here for each of those. The base rates are basically saying, like what percentage of the population out there would have a score like this, and it's saying it's about 9.5%, meaning that it's not super likely, but it could still happen. But then we see this digit span in arithmetic subtest discrepancy score right here, and that's showing the base rate of 2.2%, meaning like this really wouldn't happen very often. Only about 2% of people are, we'd only expect about 2% of the population to have that. Finally, we have the last table, which is just determining the strengths and weaknesses of the subtests using the overall mean. So it looks like, block design wasn't a strength or a weakness. Then we had similarities. It looks like at the 0.15 value, it was a strength. But then you have things like arithmetic, which is a weakness at the 0.15 and 0.05 value with a base rate of 5 to 10%, meaning we only expect 5 to 10% of the population to have a score like that. So as you can see, just like this template will map onto the hand scoring template that you probably already have, and you can just enter in the scores using this template, and hopefully you can do it in just about 5 minutes. If you like things a bit easier to see, there's also some graphs included here, and just to show the two that I have are the subtest scaled score profile and the composite score profile. These will update automatically as you go through the test, and these are separated by the different cognitive domains. So these first three would be perceptual reasoning, they'd be verbal comprehension. These next three right here would be perceptual reasoning. These two would be the working memory, and these last two here would be the processing speed of the patient using the scaled scores of each subtest. Now this last graph here is the composite score profile, and this is just looking at those composite scores of the cognitive domains. Again, 100 is going to be the average here, so anything below that can be considered below average, anything above that can be considered above average, and that is that graph. Hopefully you find that useful. And then the last thing I would say, if you want to reuse this, all you'll have to do is clear these contents here, and then it'll take a minute just to process there it is, and clear these contents here. One other thing that I forgot to mention was that for the age, this test is only rated for patients between the ages of 16 to 90, and then these supplemental tests here, these are for only patients between 16 and 69 years of age. So just keep that in mind when you're scoring this. If your patient is 91, you might have to change their date of birth here so that they're only 90 years old in order to get this template to work. And yeah, and that's everything. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.